He kept it in his left coat pocket, a gray-brown notebook, spine cracked at exactly page 144. And on the morning he found the clause, he set it open on the table and did not close it for 3 days. That was year 1 of Earth's observer status in the Orathvel conclave. This is year 24. My name is Veldurathos. I'm an elder archivist of the Kel-Orvath Assembly, and I have attended 27 consecutive sessions of the conclave without a vote, without a seat at the primary floor level, and without, until this session, any reason to believe that what I witnessed would outlast the session that produced it. I am submitting this account because the official session transcript records what was filed. It does not record what the chamber heard when it understood what had been filed. Those are different things. I have spent 27 sessions learning to notice the difference. The humans found the clause. That is the short version. The longer version is this. The Orathvel Conclave's founding charter contained 17 procedural clauses that had never once been used in 74 years. Not because they were broken, not because they were unclear, because no observer-class species had ever held at the same moment the access, the standing, and the patience to use them. The humans found the one that had been waiting. They spent 23 years making sure they were ready when they did. I will tell you what that looked like. The convocation anchorage Dreval Orvath is, by any measure, an impressive structure. 9 tiers of seating rise around a central floor in a near-perfect amphitheater, quartz composite walls that catch and hold light at a color temperature calibrated, according to the original build specifications, to reduce aggressive arousal responses in species with photosensitive threat processing systems. The walls rise 55 meters. The genealogical murals of the 31 founding species begin at the 12-meter mark and do not descend. The overall effect is one of permanence, of a place that has always existed and intends to continue. The observer gallery sits 1.6 meters below the floor level of the voting delegates. This is listed in the original build documents as sightline equalization. I have the original build documents. I obtained them 11 years ago under a Statute 4 public disclosure request because I wanted to know if the specification was original or added later. It was original. It was in the first draft. Whoever designed this chamber decided before the first stone was set that the species permitted to watch but not vote would do their watching from below. I note this not as an accusation. I note it because it is in the record, and the record is what I keep. The chamber was full for the Earth petition review. 4,200 representatives from 31 voting species filled the primary floor and the upper tiers. The observer delegations, 9 species, combined tenure averaging 28 years in this gallery, sat in their allocated section below floor level and watched the chamber fill above them. I have a good view from this section. After 27 sessions, I know exactly which angles allow me to see the primary podium, the arbiter's platform, and the entrance corridor simultaneously. I arrived early enough to take my preferred position. I brought 3 session record binders, 2 writing instruments, and nothing else. Grand Arbiter Convocant Drusselvel of the Varath Compact entered the chamber at the designated session hour. He is 9 feet of gray-green scaled plating, and the ceremonial rank marks etched into both shoulder crests took 40 years of service to complete. When he addresses the full chamber, he uses his secondary jaw, a structure most Varath use only in private or in very close quarters. In open session at the distances of this amphitheater, it produces a subharmonic that does not register as sound in most species' auditory range. It registers as pressure. Smaller species feel it in the chest cavity. I have felt it in 27 sessions. I have never entirely stopped noticing it. He does not carry documents into the chamber. He has staff for that. He has dismissed 22 membership petitions across his 40-year tenure. I have read all 22 session logs. Each one records the dismissal as resolved without incident. The word resolved appears in every log. The phrase without incident appears in every log. The logs are, to a document, consistent. I note this because consistency can be evidence of accuracy. It can also be evidence of a template. The Earth petition was introduced by Drusselvel's senior staff at the 40-minute mark of the session. 4,100 pages of treaty compliance records, economic contribution documentation, and diplomatic service history. The staff member who introduced it used the standard petition framing. I have heard it 22 times before, across 22 prior petitions, and then placed the document stack on the primary floor distribution surface. The subharmonic from Drusselvel's address ran through the chamber. 3 of the 9 observer gallery species are small enough that I could see their physical response to it. A tightening, a stillness, the body's automatic register of something it reads as warning even when the words are procedural. The petition pages were distributed across the amphitheater floor. No human delegate moved to retrieve them. I wrote that down. I write most things down, but I wrote that one down twice. I should tell you about the depot in Anvar 3. I visited it once, 14 months before this session, at 7 Orathdon's invitation. He did not frame it as an invitation to inspect the work. He said he wanted someone to see it who would know what they were looking at. I am still deciding whether that was a compliment to my judgment or a practical assessment of my archival training, possibly both. Anvar 3 is a small agricultural settlement. The depot is a converted grain storage facility at the eastern edge of the settlement. Chosen, and Seven told me this himself, without apparent irony, because it had an uninterrupted power grid and a reliable bakery within walking distance. The power grid was necessary. The bakery, he said, was also necessary, just differently. The work covered the walls, 23 years of annotation in 4 different inks, the colors corresponding, I eventually understood, to 4 different phases of the legal analysis. The original charter text in black, the procedural cross-references in blue, the session transcript citations in red, the margin notes in green, which were the most recent and the most dense, and which covered, in several sections, the original text almost entirely. Page 144, that was where it started. 7 Orathdon is 52 years old and has the professional bearing of someone who decided very early that urgency was not a useful working condition. He moves at a pace that reads, in every body language catalog I have consulted, as deliberate, not slow, deliberate. There is a difference. He reads every founding document aloud before he begins work on it, not to memorize it, he told me, but because written law sounds different when it has to pass through a throat. You hear things in the spoken version that the written version lets you skip. He found Clause 9, Article 3 in Year 1 of Earth's observer status. Read the founding charter aloud 3 times. Circled the clause in red, the archive citation color, which I note means he categorized it immediately as evidence, not as a possibility. Went to the bakery the next morning, came back, started writing. The ledger notebook he keeps in his left coat pocket, gray-brown composite, spine cracked at exactly page 144, is where he first annotated the clause. That crack is not damage. It is the record of how many times that page has been the first one opened. I set my own hand against the wall annotations when I visited. Not reading them, just contact. I do this with documents of significance. I am not entirely sure when I started doing it, but I have done it for as long as I can remember, and I have learned not to question the habits that tell you something true about what you are looking at. This was significant. I could feel that it was significant before I understood why. His team was 6 people. Dr. Thesson Orath, xenolegal scholar, author of Parallel Sovereignty in Multi-Species Constitutional Architecture, a text that had been read by 9 non-human legal scholars before this session and cited in 4 of their own published works. He is the kind of academic who considers a conversation successful if both parties leave knowing more than they arrived with. He had been working with 7 since year 4. Commander Leth Orvan's strategic analysis, 21 years of tracking conclave voting record anomalies. She maintained a database that cross-referenced every membership petition denial with the procedural grounds cited and the subsequent application of those same grounds to admissions. The database was not, technically, any part of the legal filing. It informed every paragraph of it. Yen Castle, Communications Architecture. She designed the Broadcast Intercept Protocol at Relay Hub Kashari Null 7, a secondary broadcast node sitting 0.4 light seconds from the anchorage. The protocol was built on a Statute 4 provision allowing observer species representatives to submit documents to the public session record via authenticated broadcast channel. Yen Castle spent 11 years making sure the authentication would process before any staff member at the primary podium could interrupt it. Ambassador Yen Sorath Davin, lead diplomat, chamber presence. She had attended the last 6 Earth petition reviews. She had not spoken during any of them. She had watched. I have since reviewed the chamber feed timestamps from each of those 6 sessions. She was in the observer gallery for every one. She did not stand. She did not address the session. She watched, and she remembered what watching from below floor level looked like to the chamber above. Archivist Pel Drevin, Archive and Memory. She was responsible for page 2114 of the filing. I will come to page 2114. No weapons, no fleet position, no threat of any kind. That is what 23 years on folding tables in a converted grain depot produced. Not a countermeasure. Not a military option held in reserve. A document. A very specific document built from a very specific clause, supported by 74 years of the conclave's own records. I want to be precise about this, because I think precision matters here. The filing contained no external evidence. Every piece of supporting documentation came from the conclave's own session transcripts, obtained under Statute 4 public disclosure. Seven Orathdon and his team did not need to find anything the conclave had hidden. They needed only to read, carefully, what the conclave had published. The founding charter had 17 procedural clauses no species had ever needed. Seven Orathdon found the one that needed them. Clause 9, Article 3, Charter Compliance Audit Provision. Any observer species may request a formal audit of conclave membership procedures, provided a minimum of 7 observer species co-sign the request. Audit findings are entered into the permanent session record and require public codification response within 90 days. Seven told me, when I visited Anvar 3, that he sat with that clause for 3 days before he moved, not because he was uncertain, because he wanted to be sure he was reading it correctly when he circled it in red. He was reading it correctly. 6 weeks before the session, 9 observer-class species received a 14-page brief. The cover note read, "We are not asking you to act. We are asking you to be present and to sign." I received mine on an ordinary morning in the small office I keep near the Kelorvath Assembly's Session Records archive. I read it in one sitting, 40 minutes, cover to cover, including the 3 appendices. When I finished, I ran the pad of one manipulator tip along the spine of the nearest session record binder. Not reading it, just contact. The same thing I had done against the wall in Anvar 3. My counsel asked me that evening why I had pressed my acknowledgement token so quickly. I told them they have been reading the room we built. They read it more carefully than we did. My counsel was quiet for a moment. Then one of them asked if I was certain the filing would succeed. I told them I was not certain of that. I was certain that it was correct. Those are, I have learned, 2 different kinds of certainty, and the second one is the one that is worth acting on. The Dovan Assembly signed the same evening. Their bioluminescent fringe array dims under administrative stress. I have watched it happen in 27 sessions, the light going pale and flat when the procedure becomes difficult. And their lead representative told me later that the fringe had stayed bright through the entire reading of the brief. That was unusual. I noted it. The Sunward Orvine signed the following morning. They maintain a running institutional grievance record, updated annually for 33 years. Their representative brought the physical copy to the signing. It was heavier than I expected. The Velorvon Compact signed last, and their signing raised a question the brief itself answered. 7 small system species operating under a shared diplomatic charter, rotating representatives by session. Were they one co-signatory or 7? The filing included a 31-page legal personality documentation establishing their standing as a unified petitioning entity. The question of whether that standing was valid was, the filing noted, one the founding bloc could challenge within 6 hours of the filing's receipt under standard charter rules. The founding bloc had never encountered the question before. The filing had been ready for it for 11 years. 9 signatures. Clause 9, Article 3 required a minimum of 7. The ledger notebook on the depot table had been left open to page 140 for the morning 7 found the clause. When anyone asked what it was, he said, "A question the conclave has not yet been asked." He was wrong about that. It was the answer. The session opened at the designated hour. Drusselvel took the arbiter's platform. His staff arranged the Earth petition materials at the distribution surface. I was in my observer gallery position, preferred seat. Left of center, clear line of sight to the primary podium, the arbiter's platform, and the entrance corridor. Ambassador Yen Sorath Davin was seated with the human observer delegation below floor level, 12 meters to my left. She was holding a flat gray transit case on her lap. Both compartments were empty. The clasp was closed. The petition review began. Drusselvel's address to the chamber ran 14 minutes. The subharmonic carried across the gallery. I felt it in my chest, the same as I have in 27 sessions, and I wrote down the time it started and the time it ended, the same as I always do because the record does not keep itself. The petition was introduced. 4,100 pages distributed across the floor. The human delegates did not move. Then Drusselvel dismissed it. The language was procedural. The grounds were the same grounds listed in 22 prior session logs. The word resolved was used. I wrote it down. And at that precise moment, the moment the dismissal address concluded before the chamber had processed the close, before any delegate had moved or spoken, 0.4 light seconds away, At Relay Hub Kashari 07, Yen Castle activated the secondary broadcast channel. The authentication processed in 3 seconds. Filing number 9441 Vel Sub 1. Charter Compliance Audit Request. Clause 9, Article 3. Transmitted simultaneously to all 4,200 delegate personal feeds. Transmitted simultaneously to the same 14-system public broadcast channel carrying the primary session. Transmitted simultaneously to 14 billion viewers watching the session live. The filing reached Drusselvel's staff in 11 seconds. It reached all 4,200 delegate feeds in the same transmission. It reached 14 billion viewers on the public channel before he finished his address. Drusselvel's staff brought the notification to him at the podium. He read the cover page. The inner eyelid closed. It was slow. It was very slow. He cannot suppress it. I have watched him closely enough across 40 sessions to know that this is the one tell he cannot manage. He closes it when he has been caught, and he closed it now, and the chamber was still processing the dismissal address and did not yet know what had just been filed. But I knew. I had read the brief 6 weeks prior. I knew what the cover page said. I ran my manipulator tip along the spine of the session record binder in my lap, and I waited. The filing's body reached every delegate feed within 90 seconds of transmission. 41 documented instances across 74 years in which membership petitions were denied on procedural grounds later applied inconsistently. Not alleged inconsistencies. Documented ones, cited by session record number, page number, and transcript timestamp. 6 founding species admission records that would have failed the same criteria applied to the denied petitions, also cited by record number and timestamp. Every piece of evidence drawn from the conclave's own session transcripts under Statute 4 public disclosure. No external source, no outside documentation, no accusation requiring independent verification. The record was sufficient. The record had always been sufficient. No one had read it carefully enough to use it. They read it, she read it, they read it. 23 years of reading had produced 41 citations and 6 counterexamples, and every single one of them was already in the conclave's own files, published and accessible, waiting for someone with the access, the standing, and the patience to pull them in the right order. The chamber was beginning to understand what had been filed. I watched the delegate feeds, personal screens lighting up across 4,200 positions. The Dovan Assembly's fringe array had gone bright, not dim bright, the color of it sharp and clean against the gray of the amphitheater walls. The sunward Orvine's wings, folded at rest across the last 3 sessions I had observed them, shifted at the shoulder joint. Not unfolding, just shifting. A recalibration of weight. 9 observer-class species had been waiting an average of 28 years to be asked. The ask had taken 12 pages. The founding block had 6 hours to challenge the co-signatures. No challenge was filed. The filing had been in the record for 4 minutes. I know this because I was watching the session clock on my personal feed, and I had written down the time of authentication and the time Drusselvel's staff brought him the cover page, and I subtracted one from the other while the chamber processed what it had received. 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, every delegate in the room had the filing on their personal feed. In 4 minutes, 14 billion viewers on the public channel had it too. In 4 minutes, the founding charter of a 74-year institution had been used against itself for the first time. The chamber did not know yet what page 2114 said. I did. Let me tell you about Archivist Pel Drevin. She joined Seven's team in year 11, brought on specifically for one task, building the list, not writing it. Building it, pulling petition records from the conclave's own archive, cross-referencing submission dates with session transcripts, verifying population counts and home system designations against independent stellar records, confirming which of the listed species still existed and which did not. She worked on it for 12 years. Page 2114 of Filing 9, 441 Vel Sub 1 is the beginning of what she produced. A list of 340 species that petitioned for conclave membership between year 1 and year 74 of the Orathvel conclave. Every name, every population count at the time of petition, every home system, every petition date, every stated grounds for denial. 87 of those species no longer exist. The list does not note which ones. The names are there, the same as the names of the species that still exist, in the same format, in the same order of petition submission. If you want to know which ones are gone, you have to look them up yourself. Pel Drevin told me later that this was a deliberate choice. She said the list was a record, not an editorial. The record does not distinguish between the living and the dead. It records who came and what they asked and what they were told. Embedded in the docket, as a mandatory exhibit under Statute 4's evidentiary requirements, was a 44-minute audio record. Every name on the list, read aloud, in order of petition submission. One name, one population count, one home system, one petition date, then the next name, for 44 minutes. Delegates' personal feeds received the audio record as a required document the moment the filing authenticated. It began playing automatically on the primary chamber audio system under the same Statute 4 provision. There was no mechanism in the session rules for Drusselville to stop it, not without invoking a procedural override that would itself have required a full chamber vote. And by the time his staff had identified the provision, the record had been playing for 6 minutes. The chamber was quiet, not the quiet of a chamber waiting for a speaker, the quiet of a chamber that has stopped doing what it was doing and is listening to something it did not expect to hear. I watched Drusselville during the 44 minutes. He did not call for order. He did not invoke tabling authority. He did not look at his staff after the first 2 minutes. He stood at the arbiter's platform and he listened, and the inner eyelid, the one that had closed slowly when he first read the cover page, did not close again. I have thought about this in the weeks since the session. The inner eyelid closes when he has been caught. That is what I have observed across 40 sessions. It closes once, and then it processes, and then it does not close again because after that first moment the processing is finished. It closed once, when he read the cover page. For the next 4 minutes, while his staff briefed him and the chamber absorbed what had been filed, it was open. For the 44 minutes of the audio record, it was open. He was not processing anymore. He had finished processing. He was listening, the same as every other delegate in the room, to 340 names in the order they came. I do not know what he thought during those 44 minutes. I record what I observe, and I note where what happened and what was heard might differ. I cannot record what a person thinks. I can record that for 44 minutes, the most powerful procedural officer in the Orathvel conclave stood at his platform in a quiet chamber and listened to a list of every species that had ever asked to be part of what he ran and had been told no. The fringere on the Dovan Assembly's lead representative had gone fully bright. It stayed bright for the entire 44 minutes. His staff confirmed in writing, at minute 31 of the audio record, that Drusselville had the procedural authority to table the filing for 30 days under normal session rules. They placed the confirmation on the platform surface in front of him. He read it. He set it face down on the surface. He did not invoke the tabling provision. I wrote that down. She did not raise her voice. She did not move toward the chamber floor. She did not look at Drusselville. Ambassador Yen Sorath Davan had been seated below the floor level of the chamber for 4 hours and 11 minutes. She had not addressed the session. She had not stood. She had held the flat gray transit case on her lap, both compartments empty, clasp closed, and she had watched. She had attended 6 prior Earth petition reviews without standing. She had attended 23 years of preparation without standing. She had read 700 pages of the filing, including page 2114, and she had not stood. The audio record reached its final entry at minute 44. A species with a population of 900,000 across a single system no longer recognized by any active navigation chart. The name, the population count, the home system, the petition date, the stated grounds for denial. Then the record ended. The chamber was quiet before she moved. She stood, not quickly, not with any visible urgency. She stood the way someone stands when they have decided, and the deciding happened a long time before this moment, and the standing is simply what comes after. The chamber registered it the way chambers register things that have not happened before. A stillness first, then a shift of attention across 4,200 positions, then quiet, a different kind of quiet than the quiet of the audio record, a held quiet, a waiting quiet, the quiet of 4,200 people understanding that something was about to be said that they should hear. She said 11 words. We did not come to ask for what we deserve. We came to show you what the charter already requires. She said, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That is how long the silence lasted on the official session clock. I have reviewed the public feed timestamp. I have checked it twice. 4 minutes and 11 seconds is longer than any single procedural pause in the recorded history of the Orathvel conclave. The record goes back 74 years. I have checked that too. No delegate spoke. No staff member moved. The subharmonic from Drusselville's secondary jaw, the one that runs through 27 of my sessions like a low current in the floor, was absent. He did not activate it. He stood at the platform and the chamber was quiet, and 4 minutes and 11 seconds passed. Grand Arbiter Convocant Drusselvel called for recess. In 40 years of session tenure, he had not called for recess. Not once. His session logs contain no prior instance. I have read all 40 years of those logs, not in preparation for this account, but over the course of 27 sessions, because I read session logs the way some species collect objects, because the record is how I understand things. There is no prior recess call, not in a contested session, not in a session that ran 12 hours over schedule, not in the session in year 51 when 2 founding species delegations walked out and did not return for 9 days. No recess. Until now, I note this without further commentary. No further commentary is required. At Relay Hub Kashari Null 7, 0.4 light seconds from the anchorage, 7 Orath Dawn received the recess notification on a passive feed. He had been in the depot at Anvar 3 during the entire session, seated at the same folding table where the work had been done, not because he needed to be there for anything to function, but because, he told me later, he had started the work at that table, and it seemed right to be there when it finished. He had a cup of something warm that had gone cold 2 hours in, and he had not noticed until the recess notification came through. He picked up the ledger notebook from the table. He did not open it. He stood at the window, the one that faces the eastern edge of the settlement, toward the bakery, and he held it for a moment, the spine of it against his palm, the crack at page 144 under his thumb. Then he set its spine down on the windowsill and walked back to the table. It had done what page 144 was for. 340 names had been downloaded from the public conclave, feed 2.3 million times, by the time the recess ended. The recess extended 19 hours. The founding block convened under closed chamber protocol, no public record of deliberation, no session transcript, no log. I note the absence of a record. I note it because the conclave's commitment to public documentation is one of the procedural standards cited in the filing as inconsistently applied. The founding block's emergency session produced no document. I have filed a Statute 4 request for any record that exists. I have not yet received a response. The formal conclave response came at hour 20 of the recess. 90-day charter compliance review. Membership criteria to be publicly codified for the first time in 74 years. The petition from Earth and all 9 co-signatory species advanced to formal consideration under the new codified process. Grand Arbiter Convocant Drusselvel's statement was 41 words long. I counted them. I do not quote them here. They contain no admission. They contain no acknowledgement of the 340 names. They contain the word procedural 4 times, the word review 3 times, and nothing else of note. He is still standing. His authority is intact. His rank marks are unchanged. He will preside over the next session. He stood in a chamber of 4,200 representatives and listened to 44 minutes of names. And then he heard 11 words. And then he called a recess he had never called in 40 years. And now his statement says procedural review 4 times and does not say the names. He knows the filing is in the permanent record. He knows the 41 inconsistencies are in the permanent record. He knows the 340 names are in the permanent record. He knows the record goes back 74 years, and he knows someone read all of it. Dr. Thesson Orath filed 3 follow-on briefs in the 90-day window. Each one used a different previously uninvoked charter clause. The second brief cited Clause 11, Article 7, the Membership Criteria Public Codification Provision, which required the conclave to publish its full standards in plain language within 60 days of any compliance review finding. The third brief cited Clause 14, Article 2, the Observer Class Elevation Procedure, dormant for 44 years. The fourth brief, which he filed on day 89 of the window, cited Clause 6, Article 5, which I had not encountered before and which Dr. Orath described to me when I asked him about it, as the one about what happens when the review itself is reviewed. I asked him how many of the 17 clauses they had studied. All 17, he said. I asked him how many they planned to use. He said, as many as it takes. I noted this. I note it because there are 17 clauses and they have now used 4, and the record is permanent, and 7 Orath Dawn is 52 years old and still visits the bakery every morning. 6 weeks after the session, the Velorvon Compact's legal personality was formally recognized by the Conclave's Procedural Committee. This is the first new legal entity classification the Conclave has issued in 44 years. The Compact, 7 small system species who built a shared diplomatic charter specifically to meet competition thresholds they could not reach alone, is now a recognized entity in Conclave procedural law. Their charter recognition had been disputed informally for years. The filing answered the dispute. The procedural committee's recognition made the answer permanent. I attended the procedural committee session as an observer. The room was small, 12 seats, a single document table, no subharmonic range from anyone present. I sat in the observer position at the back wall and watched the committee work through the recognition motion. It was procedurally straightforward. It took less than an hour. When the recognition passed, I ran the pad of one manipulator tip along the edge of the session record binder on the table beside me. Not reading it, just contact. I have done this in committee rooms before, in archive corridors, against the walls of a grain depot in Anvar 3. I have done it when something is significant before I know why it is significant. This time I knew why before I touched it. This was the first time in 27 sessions that I sat in a procedural room, knowing the outcome before the motion was called. I did not say anything. I ran my tip along the binder edge, and I watched the recognition pass, and I wrote down the time. I returned to Anvar 3 once more, 3 days after the procedural committee session. 7 was at the folding table. Dr. Orath was across from him with a cup of something warm that was actually still warm this time. The walls still had the annotations, all 4 colors, all 23 years of them. The depot still smelled of grain dust and the faint, clean smell that comes from paper handled often. 7 had been reading names aloud for 40 minutes when I arrived. Not the full list. He does not have the stamina, he told me, to read 340 names in sequence. Not yet. He reads 20 at a time. He had been reading the same 20 for 40 minutes slowly, with the full name and the population count and the home system, because, he said, those are the things the record includes, and the record should be read the way it was written. Dr. Orath asked him why he was doing it. 7 said, because the filing put them in the record. The record is permanent, but the record doesn't read itself. Dr. Orath was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled the list toward him and read the next 20. The ledger notebook was on the windowsill. Spine down, closed. The gray-brown composite cover facing up, the crack at page 144 invisible from this angle. 23 years of margin annotations pressed shut inside it. 4 inks, 1 clause, 1 question that turned out to be an answer. 7 did not look at it when he read the names. He had the list in front of him on the table, printed, not handwritten, 2 pages, 3 columns per page, and he read from the list. The notebook stayed on the sill. Someone should read them aloud. That was the whole architecture. In the end, someone should. Dr. Orath finished his 20 names. He set the list on the table between them. 7 picked it up, found his place, and started again.